Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to my very favorite video of the entire year to film. I am so excited to share with you guys my favorite books that I read in 2023. I had a great reading year this year and I'm going to be sharing with you guys all of the books I read that I thought were the very best. These also happen to be all of the books that I gave 5 stars to this year. I am a very picky rater. I don't give out 5 stars easily because when I do, it's a book that I now consider to be a new favorite. So that would definitely be all of the books that I'm sharing with you guys in today's video. I have ranked these, so we're going to start out with my least most favorite and then ending off with my very favorite top book of the year. So let's just jump right in. Starting out with One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book follows our main character, Emma. Emma ends up getting married to her high school sweetheart, the love of her life, her soulmate, but one day her husband goes down in a helicopter crash and he is presumed dead. So Emma grieves the loss of her husband, the love of her life. She's slowly able to move forward and she ends up reconnecting with a guy that she knew in high school who was just a friend, but the more time they spend together, they end up forming a romantic connection and she's able to find room in her heart for another man and they end up getting engaged. But while she's engaged to this new man, she ends up getting a call that her husband that went down in the helicopter crash, who was presumed dead by everyone, is actually not dead. So Emma is now faced with the most impossible decision. What should she do? Which man should she pick? What direction should she decide to take for herself and for her life and for her romantic life? And I read this book for a video where I read 5 books that I predicted I would rate 5 stars, and this book ended up being the only one of the 5 of that video that I rated 5 stars. I just loved it so much. It was so emotional. This is definitely the book that I cried the hardest to this year. This is also the first book from TJR's backlist that I've read. I've read all of her more recent books, but I was really interested to see what her previous books were like, and they definitely have a very different tone, but I felt like it was so relatable. I could really put myself in the main character's shoes, and I felt like I was feeling all of these things along with her, having to make this decision along with her. It was just the most heart-wrenching thing as she's trying to weigh the pros and cons of each decision when it's a decision you can't really be logical about because it's a more emotional decision. And I think the thing that really pulled me into the story and had me so emotionally connected and invested is that when her husband goes down in the helicopter crash, you as the reader know that he's not actually dead and that she's gonna get the call that he's alive, but you grieve the loss of this man along with Emma as if he actually died. The way she feels, the emotions she goes through, the grief she feels, you feel it all with Emma. It is just so heart-wrenching. I was literally sobbing. I had to take a break in the middle of it and just like get myself together because it is the saddest, most emotional book I've read this year, and I just felt everything along with our main character. It was such a beautiful story. It had a beautiful message, and like I said, I didn't know what to expect going into a backlist book from TJR because I read her more recent books, and I love Taylor Jenkins Reid. I think all of her books are objectively so well written, but I feel like because most of her newer books are about fictional celebrities, I have a harder time connecting to them because I just don't really relate to them as much. But I feel like maybe since this one was about regular people, I just related to it so deeply, and I feel like Taylor Jenkins Reid's writing is still just as strong in her backlist books. This definitely made me want to check out more of her backlist books because this one just had me so emotionally invested. My next favorite is Heartless by Elsie Silver. This is book 2 in the Chestnut Spring series, and while I absolutely love the entire series, I rated all the books highly. I would recommend them all very highly. Heartless book 2 was by far my favorite and definitely stood out to me. In this book, our female main character is Willa and our male main character is Cade Eaton, who is one of the Eaton brothers that we're kind of following the different brothers in different books in this series. Cade is a single dad who's trying to find a nanny to take care of his son while he works on the ranch during the day, but he's having trouble finding someone. But his future sister-in-law, Summer, who we actually meet in book 1 of the Chestnut Spring series, Flawless, ends up recommending her best friend Willa because Willa is a bartender, and although she hasn't had actual experience with children, she compares being a bartender to basically babysitting. So Willa ends up coming to meet Cade, meet his son, and she and Cade don't get off on the right foot, but then Cade sees that she's really good with his son, so she ends up getting the nannying job, and we follow Willa and Cade's relationship from there. And when I finished this book, I gave it 4.75 stars. I felt like there was maybe a little something missing, but since reading this book, I read it back in I think June. I am not even kidding when I tell you guys I have thought about this book every single day this year. There are some books higher up on this list that I don't think about all the time, but I still love. This book though, I think about every single day. And I think the thing for me too is going into this book, I kind of had heard it was the fan favorite, but Flawless, book 1 in this series, I didn't love as much as everyone else, so I was a bit skeptical on how I would feel about the rest of the series. Also, Heartless is all tropes that I normally don't like and would consider to be my least favorite. It's single dad nanny, there's a child in the book, which I don't like reading about children in my books. It's grumpy sunshine, age gap. There's also other tropes throughout that I'm not going to say, but they're tropes that I would normally try to avoid, but somehow Elsie Silver wrote them all in a way that just worked so well. I feel like the characters were so strong individually in this as well as together. They had amazing chemistry. The tension and the build-up before they got together was just so good. I was rooting for them so hard to get together. Normally I really don't like a grumpy man in books, but I felt like Cade's reasonings for being grumpy in this were so justified. I also normally don't like a sunshiny female main character because they can be a little bit annoying, but Willow was positive and bubbly in the best possible way. She was so funny. She had me cracking up constantly throughout this book. She and Cade were by far my favorite characters of this series, my favorite couple of this series. They stood out so much to me, and I also felt like the book just had a great storyline. I was engaged and interested the whole time. I thought all the little details wrapped up so well together at the end, and everything just came together perfectly. I loved it so much, and it just made me fall in love with the Chestnut Springs series and with Elsie Silver's writing. I also think a testament to how much a book can impact you is when it gives you hobbies in real life that you wouldn't normally have. For example, the Chestnut Springs series are cowboy romances, which did not interest me in the slightest. I was not interested in that vibe at all. But after reading these books, they just got me so into like country stuff. I used to always say I like every kind of music except for country. Until reading these books, I started listening to country music to the point that I'm even going to Nashville next year to go to a country concert, which is unheard of. If you had told me that last year before I read the Chestnut Springs series, I would have been like, absolutely not. But that just goes to show how much I love these books and how much of an impact they had on my real life and how much I think about them. And Heartless was by far my favorite of the series. This next book that was a favorite for me was a favorite for a lot of people in 2022, and it was one that I read early in 2023 after seeing it in so many people's favorite books of the year list, and I completely see why. That is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I listened to this one on audio because it is narrated by Jeanette herself, and she does a phenomenal job. I highly recommend consuming it via audiobook. And in this book, Jeanette tells her story about her life as a child actor, her time on Nickelodeon and the show iCarly, and a big portion of the book focuses on her abusive relationship with her mother, hence the title of the book. So there are very, very heavy topics covered in this book. If you decide to pick it up, definitely check the trigger warnings beforehand. But going into this one, I am not a nonfiction person at all, especially not a celebrity memoir person. So I really wasn't sure how I was going to feel about this book. I kind of stopped watching Nickelodeon around the time that iCarly was coming out, so I knew who Jeanette was, of course, but I just wasn't sure how this book would impact me or how it would feel. But after hearing just so many people talk about how incredible it was, I needed to see for myself, and it truly is so incredible. Jeanette just has a way with words and a way of just telling her story. It is so heavy, but she just delivers it in like the most blunt way while still having like emotion to it. I can't even describe it. It's kind of just something you have to experience for yourself. I could not believe how much she went through. It was so sad hearing her story, but it was also just so interesting to hear what really went on. You would never think that these kind of things happen in the industry, but they of course do, and it was just so sad, so heartbreaking, but Jeanette was so brave for telling her story, and I thought about this one all year long. If you're gonna read any memoir, I would definitely make it be this one. I thought it was incredible. This next book is similar in that I saw it on a lot of people's favorites of the year list from 2022, so it was one of the first things I picked up in 2023, and it has remained one of my favorite books all year long, and I'm also seeing it on a lot of people's favorites lists that read it this year, kind of a similar situation. I feel like everyone who reads this book just falls in love with it, and that is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This book follows the relationship between Sadie and Sam, who meet when they're younger and they bond over their love of video games, and we kind of see their lives as they grow apart but then reconnect in college, and they come back together and they end up creating this video game company, and it follows the highs and lows of their lives individually, together. It follows their friendship, and I know everyone everyone says this, but even if you're not into video games at all, because I'm not in the slightest, you will still enjoy this book because it's more about the characters and following them individually, following their friendships, seeing the highs and lows. They're all very flawed, but they're just so interesting to follow along their lives and see everything happening to them. I think the thing in this that really stands out for me is Gabrielle Zevin's writing. It is just so incredible. It's so beautiful and so poetic, but without ever feeling overwritten. And my very favorite thing that she does in here is this book is told in third person, but she'll kind of weave in and out of different people's perspectives. Like, she'll be telling something from Sam's perspective, and then she'll do a little bit in there about how Sadie feels about the same thing, and then it'll kind of like jump to a different time without ever breaking the paragraph. And that sounds like it would be confusing and hard to follow, but it is not at all. It just makes it that much better because she does it so effortlessly. Everything is so well paced and it flowed so perfectly. I just adored this story so much. I adored following Sadie and Sam, the highs and lows of their lives. Again, I would not think that a book about video games and a video game company and the highs and lows of that, seeing the successes and pitfalls, would be interesting in the slightest, but I was gripped by this book. Every single word felt meaningful and purposeful. There was no page in here that felt like fluff. Everything felt so imperative to the story and just helped drive the narrative along, and it was just incredible. I could not recommend this book enough. It is so well written. The most fascinating characters. It really is a character-driven story. If you like a character-driven story, I think you will like this one a lot. This next one, if you had told me that this book would be this high on this list before reading it, I probably wouldn't have believed you. And I also wouldn't have believed you if I knew how much this book was going to impact me. It sounds dramatic, but it's so true. And that's The Deal by Elle Kennedy. This book follows Hannah Wells and Garrett Graham. Garrett Graham is our star of the hockey team at Briar University, and his grades have started suffering. He needs to pull up his GPA to maintain a certain grade point average to be able to keep playing hockey. And then Hannah Wells is our very studious, straight A gal who also happens to have a big crush on the quarterback of the football team at Briar University. Garrett Graham has a reputation for being total jock, very cocky, not the most likable of people, and I would say Hannah is also not the most likable character at the start. She's kind of a know-it-all, but Garrett ends up approaching Hannah. He knows that she's super smart, and he's like, hey, Hannah, I want to propose a deal. If you tutor me, help me get my grades up, I will help you get with that football player that you like. And she's like, absolutely not. She knows Garrett's reputation. She thinks he's kind of a jerk. She's like, how would you even do that? He's like, I would pretend to date you, pretend to be your boyfriend, because that would make him jealous. He would notice you. We're both athletes. We go to the same parties. We run in the same circles. Trust me, it would work. Will you please tutor me? So after some persuading, she finally agrees, and that becomes the deal. That becomes the storyline that we're following in this book. And of course, while Garrett is pretending to be Hannah's boyfriend, some real feelings arise for each other and we follow their romance. And I think this book was just such a surprise for me because, like I said at the start, neither one of the characters I thought were likable. It was very cringy. This book by no means I would say is like a profound love story with beautiful writing, but the character development, both as a couple and individually between these two, is so amazing. Hannah by the end becomes a way more likable character. Garrett, it's like night and day. He goes from like total cocky jerk to the most perfect, most ideal book boyfriend ever. And they both are dealing with pretty heavy things internally. They have their own struggles that they both help each other out with. They both complement each other so well. And the way they're there for each other is just the most beautiful thing to read about. I just loved seeing, like I said, the development of the characters, the development of their relationship. The story kept me interested the whole time. It is cringy, but I just loved it. When I talk about books having such an impact on me and just impacting things in my real life, no book has done it like this one, because not only have I just devoured every single hockey romance I can get my hands on after reading this one, I actually love hockey in my real life so much now. I follow NHL religiously now, and I've gone to my local hockey team's games. This book just like started something for me that I'm so grateful for, because now hockey is like my new personality and I love it. I have this book to thank for it, so I couldn't put it any lower on the list. I just loved it so much. My next favorite books are the To All the Boys I've Loved Before trilogy by Jenny Han. Last year I read The Summer I Turned Pretty by Jenny Han for the first time. I never read it when I was younger, when it was popular, and last year with the show coming out, I feel like these books were getting so much buzz. So I just wanted to know what they were about. I wanted fun summer vibes. I had really low expectations going into The Summer I Turned Pretty because I thought it was just gonna be very YA, super cheesy, super cringy. Wasn't really expecting to like it, but I just wanted to know what it was about from when I watched the show. And I was blown away by Jenny Han's writing. I could not believe how much I enjoyed those books. I just felt like they were so well written. They felt so nostalgic in the best way, and they just like took me back to such an enjoyable time in my childhood, and they were the best form of escapism. And I ended up giving The Summer I Turned Pretty 5 stars and put it on my favorite books of the year list last year. So I knew I wanted to read more from Jenny Han. I knew this trilogy by her was super popular. I think mostly because of the movies on Netflix, which I had never seen. But basically this series follows our main character, Laura Jean, and she writes a love letter to all the boys that she's ever had a crush on, kind of as like a diary entry whenever she just wants to get her feelings out and kind of close the chapter on her feelings for someone. She writes it all out in a love letter to them. And she doesn't intend to give these letters to the boys. She intends to like put it away for safekeeping in her room. But one day, somehow, all of these letters end up getting sent out to all of the boys that she's written a letter to. So we're following the aftermath of that. And these series I would give as a whole 5 stars to. I loved them so much. I got that same nostalgic feeling from Jenny Han's writing while reading these books. It took me back to some of the cringiest but also some of the most memorable times in my childhood. It literally felt like I was opening my old journals from like elementary and middle school and reliving some of those moments. And I actually was cleaning out my room a couple weeks ago and came across some of my old diaries from middle school, and I was like, oh my god, this feels like a Jenny Han book. Like, that's the feeling it gave me in such a good nostalgic way. I just loved it. I loved our main character, Laura Jean. I found her to be so relatable. I loved the sister relationships in here, and I loved the family dynamic. In this book, Laura Jean is the middle sister. She has an older sister and a younger sister, and then they live with their dad, and their relationship with their dad was just so sweet and endearing. Their relationship with each other was so sweet and endearing. I especially loved the youngest sister, Kitty. She was so funny. She would say the most like out-of-pocket shady things, not trying to be mean, but just like being a typical little sister, and it was just hilarious. I loved these books so much. I also love the romance. I like that you kind of don't know who she's gonna end up with. I didn't know because I'd never seen the movies, and there are like multiple love interests in this book, so I really didn't know where the story was gonna end up going, but I loved it so much. I thought it was such an incredible coming of age story. Getting into my top 3 now, so it's getting real. Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. I have seen this on almost everyone's favorite of the year video that I've watched, and for good reason. This book is incredible. In it, we're following Bree and Jacob. They are both doctors. Jacob ends up moving to the hospital where Bree works to work on the same ward as her, and when they first meet, they have a really bad first impression. Jacob comes off as kind of cold and as a jerk, and Bree is not a fan of him at all. Jacob ends up writing Bree a letter kind of explaining why he was the way he was and apologizing, and from there they start this correspondence of letters to one another, and then it becomes a fake dating situation. And there are several other tropes in this. I feel like it's more impactful if you pick it up for yourself and read it and figure out things along the way. I just remember while reading this book, I was like, oh my god, this is my ideal rom-com. This is the perfect rom-com. Anytime I pick up a romance book, I want it to be exactly like this book. This book was incredible. The characters were amazing on their own. They were so strong individually, but also them as a couple was just the most beautiful thing. They had the best chemistry. The tension between them was so good. I was so ready for them to get together and admit their feelings for one another. This book was so well paced. I feel like there were so many tropes in here, but it never felt like too much. I felt like everything in this book came about very organically. This book has amazing social anxiety rep. I felt so seen in this book, and I related so hard to our main character, Jacob. I haven't felt so strongly for a rom-com since I read People We Meet on Vacation, I think 3 years ago now. This book reminded me a lot of that book. Our main characters in this, Bree and Jacob, felt very reminiscent of Alex and Poppy and People We Meet on Vacation. I think just the banter between them, the witty inside jokes, the humor, I just loved it. This book was so smart, so well written. It checked every box for me, and I thought it was incredible. At my number 2 spot, I have 2 books because I can't talk about one without talking about the other. Fourth Wing and Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. Fourth Wing was definitely the book of the year, the most talked about, the most hyped up book of the year. I was pretty late to the game reading these books. I read it last month, and I have a reading vlog on my channel reading both Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. But we're basically following Violet Violet, who goes to this war college to train to become a dragon rider. She's always dreamed of being a scribe and studying to like write down all the history and keep records of everything, but her mom is this very powerful general, so she's kind of destined to be a writer. So that's what she does at this war college. She trains to become a dragon rider. It's very dangerous and very deadly, and we're following her on her trials and tribulations at this school. And I don't think I'm quite as obsessed with this book as everyone else. It was still 5 stars for me and I still loved it. I think the thing that made it for me was the ending. The ending really just shocked me and kind of made me look back and reflect on all the little bits and pieces that brought us to the end. And it made me reflect on Violet's character development and how much she grew as a character. And I really, really loved it. And to be so honest, if I had just read Fourth Wing this year, say if I didn't get to Iron Flame, if Iron Flame didn't come out until 2024, this book would definitely still be on this list, but it would be a little bit lower on the list. The thing that really is bumping it up to the number 2 spot is Iron Flame. I love this book so much. This book is a 6-star read. It almost made my number 1 top book of the year. If I think about it, like, it definitely at some points could be my favorite book of the year. I loved it so much. And I know that's kind of an unpopular opinion. I think most people either just didn't like this book as much as Fourth Wing, or were a little disappointed by it, or just didn't like it at all. But I loved it so much more. This is definitely a 6-star read to me. And I think the thing in this book that just really shined is the romance. Xaden is my favorite male character I've ever read about. I honestly liked the conflict in here. I kind of liked how their dynamic was in here. I feel like it made the story way more interesting and had me so invested, and I was just like taking all the crumbs of the romance that I could get. And it definitely made me appreciate Fourth Wing more. Right after I finished this, I immediately jumped in and I'm actually rereading Fourth Wing right now with my husband and just picking up on little things that I missed. Like I said, it makes me appreciate it that much more and appreciate the story that much more, so I had to put it at the number 2 spot. But love and adore Iron Flame so much. It is a 6-star read. Love Xaden, love Violet. I love the characters in here. I feel like there's such good found family in this series too that not enough people talk about. And I was just so interested and engaged and invested in this story. Almost every chapter ended on a cliffhanger and it was so hard to put down. This is the first book I read in a long time where I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot I was reading because I was so sucked into the book and into the story. And this book just had me gripped, and I haven't felt that way in a long time, and I'm definitely in my fantasy era, and I can't wait for book number 3. But Iron Flame and Fourth Wing, absolutely adored these books. And then my number 1 top spot of the year is actually going to go to 2 books. These books are books 1 and 2 in a series. They are part of a duet, so they do go together, and that is Binding and Keeping 13 by Chloe Walsh. These books take place in Ireland, and they follow our female main character Shannon and our male main character Johnny. Shannon has had a very rough home life and also a very rough time at school growing up. She's been bullied for her entire childhood. So Shannon's mom ends up picking up a second job to be able to afford to send Shannon to a nicer private school in the hopes that she won't be bullied anymore. And that's when Shannon ends up going to Tommen College, and where she meets Johnny Kavanaugh, the star of the rugby team there, and we follow their relationship. And I am such a slow burn person. Like, I like the build up and the tension so much better than the couple actually being together, which Keeping 13 is about them together. So you would think that I wouldn't like this book as much, but I honestly liked it even more because despite them being together, Johnny and Shannon still have so many challenges and struggles that they have to get through. These books are extremely heavy, so definitely check trigger warnings if you're thinking about picking them up. They go through some very intense topics in here, but these books were just so incredible. Johnny Kavanaugh is the most perfect book boyfriend. If I was to write my own book boyfriend, it would be Johnny Kavanaugh, because everything he says and does is perfection, but he still has flaws, so he doesn't feel like a fictional man. He feels like a real life person, and I'm so invested in these characters and their story and their relationship. Literally, Johnny and Shannon just saying hi to one another has me like speechless. It is just the most endearing, charming, heartwarming thing. The way their love can just transcend so many things and get them through so many hard things is just the most pure and heartwarming thing to read about. I am so excited to continue on with this series in 2024. I am just in love with this world and these characters, and I think it's so funny that these books are my favorite of this year and they're Irish books. Last year my favorite book of the year was another Irish book, Normal People, and I was trying to think about what it was, and I heard Jack Edwards say this, and he said that Irish writers just have this way of writing about the human condition. They just look at it under a microscope, and I think that really is what it is. The way at least all the Irish authors I read from write about people and their relationships, it just feels so realistic. It feels like they went inside my brain and put things on paper that I've only felt and never been able to put into words. And I just felt such a deep connection to these books. I love them so much. They've remained my favorite books for almost the whole year. I read book 1 back in March, so I love them. I cannot wait to continue on with this series and this world in 2024. I definitely need to read books 3 and 4, and I can't wait for Gibbsy and Claire's book to come out in April. I'm so excited, but I love the Boys of Tommen series. I love Johnny and Shannon. These books were definitely my favorite books of the year. And those were all of my favorite books that I read in 2023. Thank you guys so much for following me along on my reading journey this year. However long you've been here, I appreciate you watching and supporting my channel. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, I would love to have you stick around by hitting the red subscribe button down below. I have so much book content coming next year as well, and I'm excited for another year of reading. Comment below and let me know what your favorite books of the year were. I love hearing and seeing everyone's favorites. I feel like it's the best way to get new book recommendations. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you did like it, and I will see you guys so soon in my next video. Bye guys.